Northland's News Center. This is the KBJR 6 and Range 11 News at 6.
Good evening, I'm Michelle Lee. Severe thunderstorms continue to pop up all across the Northland with some...
6 p.m. Tuesday the 19th. The first signs of trouble as waves of storms started moving into the area.
We've gotten a lot of rain, especially around Grand Rapids, 1.5 inches.
An hour later, then Duluth Mayor Don Ness remembers conditions taking a turn for the worse.
I had been downtown and having dinner at Zeitgeist, and then it started to rain. Running to the car in the parking ramp, it just got drenched, and it was like, this is a very different rain.
By 9 p.m., the flash flooding had begun with no end in sight.
Look at this, just sitting right over the Twin Ports.
At 10 p.m., Duluth police ordered all vehicles off city streets as washouts began and vehicles became trapped in high water even in the middle of I-35.
We've got water coming into the building even here.
Highway 61 closed between Duluth and two harbors.
And let me see if I've got something, in fact, to wipe off my lens here. There we go. All right.
Overnight, water geysered from beneath the streets. On the far west end of town, steep terrain, rivers and creeks funneled the water and landslides into hundreds of homes. Then DPD Sergeant Chad Nagorski remembers evacuating the Fond du Lac neighborhood.
I've never seen that much water. I mean, it's something like you see on movies. People that were in Fond du Lac, you know, they have propane tanks. It actually lifted the propane tanks up, and they're floating down the St. Louis River.
Right before the edge of the bridge.
At 2 a.m., Ellie Burkar was driving down Grand Avenue when she discovered a crisis situation at the zoo.
That's when I seen the seal on the road. I thought it was a dog that got hit by a car.
After calling 911, she snapped what would become the defining photo of the flood. A seal washed from its exhibit and into the road. It survived, but 14 other animals drowned.
With the amount of water that we got, it filled up the zoo like a bathtub so quick that none of them really even had a chance to be able to try and swim very well.
Then at 6 a.m. on the 20th.
It's basically a disaster zone here in the Northland right now.
The light of day revealing scenes that, to this day, don't look real. Cars sitting in the bottom of sinkholes. People jet skiing and kayaking up and down the Miller Hill Mall area. Highway 210 and the hanging bridge washed away at Jay Cook State Park. In Proctor, a parent's worst nightmare.
I remember it was getting sucked in and pitch black.
Then 8-year-old Kenneth Markovich was playing near a stormwater drain when he was overtaken by surging water.
They were holding me back because I was going after my son without, no second thought.
Kenneth was carried a mile downstream before being miraculously spit out by the water and rescued by a stranger, narrowly avoiding becoming the lone fatality.
We didn't have anybody that actually died during the floods. From what I saw out there, that alone is kind of mind-blowing.
This map from the DNR showing where the heaviest rain fell, up to 10 inches, causing more than $100 million in damage.
As long as nobody was hurt and a plow so far was all that's lost, I think everybody's grateful, myself.
A long recovery made easier by neighborly generosity.
We had a huge outpouring of support from the United Way and Red Cross, and people were bringing pallets of water out and all this food and feeding people meals.
We won't know the full extent for many days, if not weeks, as city crews go out and try to assess what's happening.
And a rebuild leaders hope will help keep communities safer during the next flood.
So I don't think there's any question that if the same storm happened, that we would be better prepared.
The heavy flooding has caused a ruckus at the Lake Superior Zoo.
2 a.m., June 20th, 2012, Ellie Burkar was headed home from work, one of the only vehicles on the road as rain fell at the rate of inches per hour.
It was crazy.
Closed roads forcing her onto Grand Avenue, where she made a shocking discovery.
That's when I seen the seal on the road. I thought it was a dog that got hit by a car.
The heavy rain swelled Kingsbury Creek inside Lake Superior Zoo to the point the seals were washed from their exhibit and outside the facility.
Or I called 911 and let them know, and I had to say it twice. They didn't believe me, and like I was just doing a prank call, and I said, no, there's a seal from the zoo on Grand Avenue.
Shortly after, a seal was reported missing. And no, this is not a joke, people. This is real.
It was right in front of the bridge here, right before the edge.
After the fire department arrived, Burkhart took what became the defining photo of the flood. Feisty the seal, confused in the middle of the road.
I wanted to snap a picture because my husband wouldn't believe me, and nobody would believe me unless I had a picture of it. So I put it on Facebook, and it went wild.
Duluth authorities were able to recover the seal on Grand Avenue.
But what was a brief encounter for her was just the beginning of a hellish night for zoo employees.
It was shocking. It was 100% shocking.
Lizzie Larson was a zookeeper 10 years ago. She got a call from her director shortly after 2 a.m. asking her to come in and see if other animals had escaped.
I remember getting in my car and driving here and seeing portions of roads just missing. That's when we knew that animals were most likely not in their exhibits, and we needed to get a head count on them.
The polar bear got loose in the heavy rain conditions.
In addition to the seals, a polar bear had gotten out and was wandering the facility.
We were with the Duluth Police Department, and they escorted us in their vehicles around the zoo grounds, and that's how we were actually able to locate her.
The bear was tranquilized and returned to its exhibit, but other animals were not as fortunate. 14 drowned, 11 of them inside the barn.
So it was about 24 hours later before we could all kind of take a breath. And at that point, we were all up in our animal care center, and we were all just sobbing together.
It has not been a good day for the zoo.
You know, they always say, try not to get too attached, but they're your family. They are 100% your family. And we lost 14 family members that day.
Then a years-long rebuild began. Staff rerouted Kingsbury Creek before making the biggest change of all.
Yeah, let's take a look down here.
In 2012, there was nothing more than a round culvert that was under Grand Avenue. It clogged, filling the zoo with 40 feet of water. Since then, Grand Avenue was rebuilt. It's all open now under the bridge, making sure no flooding like that could ever happen again.
We needed to have that for us to be able to even sleep at night.
New infrastructure in place, as well as memorials for the animals lost, the lasting legacy of a weather disaster.
Walking through this zoo will never be the same.
So again, my first trait, surround yourself with great people, you have a better chance for being successful.
On a late May evening in Hayward, Wisconsin, dozens of students celebrate their completion of high school.
Calvin Michael Manshine.
But for one student,
Kenneth B. Markovich.
This ceremony is a celebration of life.
An 8-year-old boy is lucky to be alive this afternoon after being sucked into Proctor's sewer system and dragged for a mile.
On June 20th, 2012, then 8-year-old Kenneth Markowitz and his mom Amber were visiting family in Proctor, far from their home in Louisiana. That afternoon, the rain had let up, but the water was still churning.
Well, me and my cousin, we were playing near the water and stuff, and a man warned us not to go by that. Us being children, we decided to do it anyway. I remember just getting sucked in and pitch black.
Kenneth disappeared underground in an instant. His mother panicked and horrified.
All I remember is just going in the water, and it got up to probably above my knees, and I'm feeling around, and all of a sudden I felt like the manhole cover. They were holding me back because I was going after my son without, no second thought.
Meanwhile, in the water, the 8-year-old had the presence of mind to hold his nose and know this could be it.
Is this my last breath? And, is this where I meet God? That's what was really going through my head throughout the whole little journey. Sorry.
It's all right. And I remember one lady coming to me and she goes, "Do you want to pray?" And I said, "Yeah." Well, we were praying and somebody came up to me and told me we found a little boy.
A mile downstream, the current spit Kenneth out right in front of Gordon Marshall's house. Marshall ran to the boy and helped him.
A Proctor man finally located him in the woods 1 mile away.
He wrapped a towel over me and sat me down in his house and called the cops.
Police and Amber rushed to the home for a reunion that minutes earlier seemed impossible.
I just remember going in to the door and my son was there. You know, he was, of course, blood from head to toe, cut up and scraped.
Amazingly, Kenneth wasn't seriously injured. He and his family appreciative of the help from a complete stranger.
We're grateful for Mr. Gordy and his family.
So Kenneth and Amber returned home to Louisiana, where just a few years later, their lives would be turned upside down by another weather disaster.
Lake Charles and many parts of Louisiana had gotten hit by a hurricane, and it took our home.
The house Kenneth grew up in destroyed by wind and water.
Everything was blown out from underneath the home. The walls had shifted, everything was off.
So they were forced to find a new home, relocating to public housing in Hayward, Wisconsin, a place closer to family and someone who'd stayed in touch all those years, Gordon Marshall.
He would call to see how Kenny and I were doing, you know, how he was doing in school. Christmas cards, birthday cards. He'd become like our hero.
My dad had 10 grandchildren. He really loved kids.
Pam Marshall is Gordon's daughter. When he lost his battle with cancer in 2016, she learned how strong a bond her father had with the Markowitz family.
He had so many pictures of Ken and just the conversations that we had about their relationship. I think their relationship just really touched my heart.
So through Facebook, Pam picked up where her father left off, keeping up with Kenneth and Amber. And then nearly 10 years after the flood,
She'll be at Kenny's graduation, and we're looking forward to meeting her for the first time in person.
Yo, this is Miss Pam. This is Mr. Gordy's daughter.
3 people brought together by disaster,
Yay!
finding ways to celebrate life's victories.
Probably one of the most terrifying moments of my life was also one of the greatest blessings because I got my son back.
Travel is not advised, only in emergency situations right now because several inches of water on the roads, and that's enough to carry a car away.
Get the call early in the morning and said you have to get down to City Hall and, you know, there's a lot of damage.
Don Ness was mayor of Duluth in 2012 when disaster struck.
But it wasn't until I got to City Hall and started hearing the reports from all over the city and the culverts that were blown out and just the scope of the damage and the danger that represented.
And we won't know the full extent for many days, if not weeks, as city crews go out and try to assess what's happening.
Danger brought on not just by all the water, but by the city's failed water infrastructure, shredded by a 500-year flood.
What you saw on the surface didn't oftentimes represent the danger of what was happening underneath the surface.
The storm eating away at systems built a century earlier and exposing the need for major upgrades and improvements.
Given an infrastructure that's simply not built to handle this much water in this short of a period of time.
Then the pipe sections were also washed out and missing.
Ryan Granlund is one of the people who now oversees Duluth's stormwater systems, proud to show off the improvements made.
This would have been houses here. This was houses pre-2012.
10 years ago, there were 2 homes on this plot of land. When this creek overran its banks, it sent water into those homes, flooding them, which then sent more water shooting in all different directions, flooding other areas. Now, after the flood, the city of Duluth bought this land, demolished the homes, cleared everything out, made it a green space with a drain, so in the event of another flood, water only has one place to go. And it's not just here. About 30 homes were purchased and demolished around town using DNR grants converted into similar water collection areas.
Less prone to failure in the future.
Bigger, stronger culverts and pipes have also been installed around town. And while another flood like 2012 would still cause damage, the key is keeping it to a minimum.
Like this is what we're doing now, and we have to do as we continue to plan, as like our climate is changing, and we've got all this additional, say, risk or vulnerability.
There's no question that we need to be thoughtful about building in resilience of our built infrastructure to handle an everly increasing amount of severe weather. So I don't think there's any question that if the same storm happened, that we would be better prepared.